Right, so now that we've looked at the three main elements of the study of Nahw, and we've looked at a brief practical application of those elements, let's start by looking at the study of Nahw from a bird's eye view. So this is Nahw at a glance. This is the brief mind map, the bare bone mind map of the subject matter of Nahw. The study of Nahw really doesn't go beyond this, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's begin. Any discussion on Nahw begins with the discussion on lafz, right? So because Nahw is a discussion on language, and language begins by the sounds that come out of our mouth, right? So the ulama of Nahw, they always begin by defining that sound that comes out of the mouth of a human being. So whatever sound comes out of our mouth, it's called lafz, lafzun, okay? Lafzun. And of course, either we can utter gibberish, i.e., completely meaningless speech, or we can choose to speak something meaningful. Okay, so when something is completely meaningless, it's called muhmal. Okay, muhmal, i.e., meaningless. And when we utter something that is meaningful, it's called qawl. Qawl. Okay, it is a specific type of lafz, a sound that comes out of a mouth that is coined for a meaning. It can be either singular or murakkab, i.e., a compound structure. Right. So, with regards to the definition of lafz, the ulama of Nahw have defined lafz as الصوت المشتمل على بعض الحروف. Okay, it is a sound, الصوت, it is a sound. لفظ, اللفظ. What is lafz? It is الصوت, it is a sound. المشتمل على, that consists of بعض الحروف, some letters. Okay, anything that we say is always going to be made up of a group of letters that put together make a sound. Okay, so for example, if I say blah blah blah, it has B L A H, for example, right? That's blah. But if I say something like he is coming, now you see, any sound that comes out of your mouth must always be sort of founded upon some huruf. Okay, now if those huruf are meaningless, they will be called muhmal. Okay, and if they are meaningful, i.e., they have some meaning to it, they will be called qawl, right? So a qawl is essentially a lafz. It is lafz wudi'a, coined lima'nan, for a meaning. Okay, so these are the definitions, and we recommend that you memorize these small definitions because they will come quite handy in your further studies, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so لفظ is الصوت المشتمل على بعض الحروف. Okay, and then قول is لفظ وضع لمعنى. قول is a lafz, right? It is a lafz that is meaningful. It is coined for a meaning. Okay, it is a lafz that is coined for meaning. قول is a lafz that's coined for a meaning. It's لفظ وضع لمعنى. So once you've understood that, we can move on to the second step. Any speech that comes out of our mouth that is meaningful becomes the study of Arabic grammar, i.e. Nahw. And of course, that's the case with the study of grammar in any language. The ulama and the experts of the syntactical sciences of the language must only cater to and must only concern themselves with what is meaningful. Right, and that is exactly what ulama of Nahw do. They only focus themselves on the meaningful speech. Because sounds in general are the subject matter of the science of phonetics, right? So that is more to do with this study of tajweed, right? So each step of a human being's speech has been classified in each of the sciences of Arabic grammar, Arabic language, right? So when you starting with the very bare bone sounds of the human mouth, uh, we that's the subject matter of tajweed, and then you start off with saying words, and then that word is looked at from a sarf perspective, a morphological perspective, or it's looked from a grammatical, syntactical perspective, which is the subject matter of Nahw. And then after you've looked at speech from that angle, there's the next step would be to look at the speech from a ma'ani perspective of what emotions are being conveyed, what meanings are being conveyed, right? Um, how the structure of the words conveys a different meaning. So that's more to do with the meaning of the sentence as opposed to the sentence itself, right? So these are different levels of speech, and then a higher level would be fiqh, the fiqh, right? The deeper understanding of. So the science of fiqh utilizes all of these sciences of the Arabic language. In fact, ulama say that the language, the science of usul fiqh, the science of legal hermeneutics or jurisprudence, is 80% or above just usul that have been derived from the Arabic language, the sciences of the Arabic language. Okay, so coming back to the discussion, when you say something meaningful, which is called qawl, i.e. a lafz wudi'a lima'nan, a lafz that is coined for a particular meaning. Now, any word that you say can either be a singular word, or it can be a phrase or a sentence, right? It can be a compound of a few words joined together, or it can be a singular word on its own. Okay? A singular qawl, right, i.e. a single word, is called mufrad, qawlun mufrad. And that qawlun mufrad is essentially what we call al-kalima, an Arabic word, al-kalima, right? Kalima. And based on this hierarchical definition that we're sort of coining here, you have al-kalima, i.e. this qawl mufrad. It is essentially a lafz, it is a sound that comes out of a mouth that is coined for a meaning, wudi'a lima'nan. But what kind of meaning? A compound meaning or a singular meaning? Mufrad, i.e. singular meaning, okay? So ulama of Nahw have defined al-kalima, i.e. Arabic word, al-kalima, as having two different definitions. Sometimes they just say al-kalimatu qawlun mufrad. It's just a qawl that is mufrad, right? And the word qawl, it sort of encapsulates in itself or inside it the meaning of a lafz that is coined for a meaning. So sometimes that is a definition of Ibn Hisham. So that's the definition that is used sometimes, and sometimes they just use a complete hierarchical breakdown of the words up till the mufrad, and then they utilize all of those stages in the definition, right? So if you look at this definition over here, al-kalimatu lafzun, right? So it starts right at the beginning of the mind map, right, or the flow chart over here. So al-kalimatu lafzun, it is a lafz, i.e. it's a sound that is mushtamil ala, consists of ba'd al-huruf, some letters, right? Al-kalimatu lafzun, it is a lafz, right, that is wudi'a lima'nan, right? It's coined for a meaning, i.e. it's a qawl. But from the two types of qawl, it is mufrad, i.e. it's singular, right? And likewise, if this qawl is compound, i.e. it consists of more than one word, either it can be a phrase or it can be a complete sentence, right? If this compound of words is a complete sentence, it's tam, it's complete, then it's called kalam, right? It's called kalam, a complete sentence in Arabic. Whereas if it is not complete, i.e. غير تام, murakkab غير تام, if it is an incomplete compound of words, then, I mean, in English you call it a phrase, but in Arabic we will just call it murakkab غير تام. It's not a kalam, it's not a sentence, right? So you can have two types of murakkabat. two types of murakkab. You can have a murakkab that is complete, i.e. a complete sentence, which is kalam, speech, and you can have a murakkab of words, a compound of words that is ghayru tam. It's not a complete sentence, but it's still a compound of words. It's still a group of words together that conveys some sort of meaning, and this is what we call essentially a phrase in English, right? It's a phrase, and the difference between a phrase and a sentence is essentially what we're looking at here. Murakkab tam would be a sentence, a complete sentence, and murakkab ghayr tam would be a phrase, right? Just a small phrase that is incomplete. Okay, inshallah ta'ala. Now, each of these murakkab tam has further divisions, and then murakkab ghayr tam has some further divisions. And likewise here, a qawl that is mufrad, a meaningful speech that is mufrad, singular, i.e. a word, i.e. al-kalima, is further divided into ism, fi'l and harf as well, right? So mufrad has these three further divisions, either in an ism, a mufrad, a kalima in Arabic would either be an ism, or a fi'l, or a harf, right? And the discussion doesn't go beyond these three, because there's no other type of word that can be found. And ulama of Nahw, they have, when they start the books of Nahw, they mention this. Essentially, why is it the case that there's only three types of words in the Arabic language? Why is there no fourth type? For example, in English you have nouns and verbs, and you have these conjunction words, but then you have adjectives, right? Then you have proper nouns, and then you have X, Y, and Z, right? Types of different words. But in Arabic, it's quite simplified. It's ism, fi'l, and harf, right? There's only three types of words in the Arabic language, essentially, right? So this is essentially what Nahw is going to talk about, right? It's going to talk about meaningful speech, lafzun wudi'a li ma'nan, and it's going to look at speech from two angles, from its singular perspective, i.e. when words are disjointed, when they are on their own, and it's going to look at words as murakkab, i.e. grouped together in a sentence or a phrase. And that is it. That is simply it, right? Inshallah. So in the next section, we will dive deeper into each of these sub branches of mufrad, right? So ism, we'll talk about more about that, inshallah. We'll talk about fi'l, we'll talk about huruf, we'll talk about the types of kalam, we'll talk about murakkab, ghayru tam, right? So each of these will be the subdivision of this. But it's essentially, in a nutshell, this is what the subject matter of Nahw is. You always talk about the kalimat and which are mufrad, and you talk about murakkabat, right? The groups of words, i.e. Sentences or phrases, inshallah, and each of them have their separate specific types. Before we end this section, before we move on to the next section, let's quickly look at the definition of al-kalam here. Al-kalam is, as we said, a sentence, okay? It's a sentence. Now, sentence, as we understand from English as well, it's a piece of information, right? It's a group of words that, when put together, convey a specific piece of information that, when said, conveys to a listener an information that he can pause at and be satisfied with something has been, with what has been said. For example, if I said book, the person would be like, mate, what do you mean book? Right? What do you mean book? What do you mean by book? Right? So these are questions. But if I say, this is a beautiful book, right? So now this is a complete sentence, right? It has joined words in a way that the listener, when he listens to the sentence, right, he has no further questions, right? A complete piece of information has been conveyed to him, as opposed to book, right? That conveys no complete piece of information. It's just a trigger to some meaning, but not a complete meaning, right? So that is essentially what kalam is, right? And the ulama of Nahw have put this in the words like so: ma tadammana kalimataini bil isnad. The kalam, i.e. An Arabic sentence, kalam, is what tadammana joins kalimataini, two words, bil isnad, with this property called isnad. Now, isnad is a property, essentially what we described in using the example of this is a beautiful book or a good book, right? Now, isnad is a property that exists between two words when when these words are put together, they convey a complete meaning, right? It is a relationship between, say, a verb, a subject, and an object, or a verb and a subject, right? Or a subject and an object in a sentence. So when two words are put together in a way that they convey a complete piece of information, you can say that there's an isnad, there is this link between these two words that allows for them to convey a piece of information. If two words are put together in a way that no piece of information is conveyed, then these two words will not have isnad. For example, using the example of English, if I say book bad, that means nothing to us, right? Unless it's being spoken by a toddler, and the toddler, we can sort of judge what he's trying to say. But let's keep that aside. If I say now, this book is a bad book. Now you see, like, I've joined the words book and bad in a meaningful way. Now I can say that there's an isnad that exists between these two words, book and bad. That's essentially what the concept of isnad is, inshallah. But as we mature in our study of Nahw, these things will become crystal clear bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Before we end, just make sure, inshallah, that you go through these definitions, and I highly recommend that you memorize these definitions, because these will become sort of the bare bone foundation of your study of Nahw, right? اللفظ is الصوت المشتمل على بعض الحروف, and the meaningful lafz is قول لفظ وضع لمعنى, right? And if a qawl is mufrad, a singular, it's called a kalima, and kalima is essentially a lafzun wudi'a lima'nan mufrad, or you can choose to say al kalimatu qawlun mufrad. And with regards to murakkab, you can say murakkab is just a group of words that's just conceptual. We don't need to define that, because that's not important in terms of the definition of things. But then look at the definition of kalam and memorize it, inshallah. ما تضمن كلمتين بالإسناد. الكلام, kalam is ما تضمن, what joins كلمتين, two words, بالإسناد, with the relationship of isnad. Okay, inshallah ta'ala.